Welcome back, and thank you again for joining another episode of Theories with David. On today's episode, we'll be diving into ecological systems theory, which was developed in 1977 by Yuri Bronfenbrenner and expanded through decades of research. We'll be exploring what the theory says, how it explains people's problems, and what it prescribes as solutions, and how it fits in the field today. We'll also be looking at a modern extension from neuroscience, early childhood policies, and the social ecology of adversity. While we dive into Brenner's theory, we're going to look at it through a different lens and we're going to isolate it to a client named Joe. He's a 10-year-old boy who's bright, funny, creative, but struggles both in home and at school. As we walk through his story, we're going to see how the ecological layers influence him, where problems arise, and what theory can say we can do to help him. So let us dive into Joel's world. 1. Bronfenbrenner explains, or let me say he argues that human development doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in interconnected layers. So let's look at these layers for Joe. One being his microsystem, Joe's immediate world. This is where Joe spends every day and most impactful influences live. So, Joe's mom, she's a mother that works two jobs and she's always exhausted. His dad, who's present but emotionally distant because he's dealing with untreated depression. Apologies. Now, when we look at his school, Joe's teachers are overwhelmed by large classrooms. His peers, his friends, some supportive and some bully, and after school programs he attends where his mom works late. Now, Joe wants to do well, but he's navigating inconsistent supports at home. Inconsistent supports at home. Limited teacher's attention at school, and the peer conflict. The microsystem teaches us Joe's behavior is shaped by the relationships right in front of him, right? So now let's go to his mesosystem, how Joe's mesosystem interact. As these connections continue to be weak, Joe becomes the link between systems, carrying school stress home and his home stress back to school. Now we're going to look at the exosystem, which these systems don't affect Joe directly, they affect him indirectly. So his mom's employer doesn't allow her to schedule any flexibility, so this increases stress for her and reduces time with him. The family lost access to their local community center when funding was cut. So now that removes that safe environment that Joe looked forward to going to after school. His father's company recently downsized, which caused his father to be laid off and created financial pressure in his home. Now, the neighbor has limited public transportation, making it harder to access the medical, health, and tutoring services. Now, Joe never walks into these places, but these ripple effects impacted him very deeply. The ecosystem shows us that even distant policies and structures can shape the child's daily emotional world. Okay, now we'll look at the macro system, which is on a bigger picture shaping Joe. That's his cultural influences, the economic forces, and like political policies. His societal beliefs about mental health, education, and family roles. For Joe, his macro system includes a culture that stigmatizes men seeking mental health treatment, leaving his dad untreated. economic inequality that makes it hard for his family to access high quality childcare, and a school system with overcrowded classrooms. The racial and socioeconomic bias that affects how teachers interpret Joe's behavior. Joe is swimming in a system that predates him, that these invisible forces still shape. Now, the Chronos system, which is time and change in his life, these dimensions include the life transitions and historical shifts. So, for one, his parents separated for a short period of time when he was 6. So he remembers that. Remember, he is 10. So this is 4 years ago. The family moved twice in 3 years due to raising rents. Now, even we're going to look at COVID-19 disrupting school and the routine. He also grew up during a rise of social media, which affected his self esteem and peer relationships. At this time, events compounded stress and influence how Joe's functions today. Okay, so let's ask ourselves why Joe struggles. Bronfenbrenner's descriptive theory tells us that Joe's behavior is not his personal flaw, it's the ecological response. Joe challenges are coming from the interacting systems, right? His microsystem is strained by his parents' stress, the inconsistent support, and bullying. His mesosystem is weak because the home and school rarely communicate. And then his exosystem adds pressure due to the unstable work schedule and loss of community resources. The macrosystem creates a structural barrier, unfunded schools with the stigma around mental health and the economic inequality that his family is facing. Now, the chrono system adds instability. The moves, the pandemic, which caused disruption in school, um, and the development in transitions. Research would say, including if we look at his the biologic how it's biologically embedded, that affecting Joe's stress, his stress hormones, learning, and when we zoom out, the struggle makes sense. We can look at what in proximal processes we can use. We can use like a mentor, which can meet them once a week. Small reading groups for individual attention, maybe even a consistent after school staff member who builds trust, the family routine, like a nightly check-in, maybe even homework time from dad or mom, that could help him. And these will also just build a positive relationship and create stability for him. Now, for his Mac system, let's look into like counseling for Joe, for his dad, let's say. I'm sorry. Let's look at the counseling for his dad. The family therapy that in home therapy could help. Um, his classroom accommodations. That's where, I know it's hard for mom, but we could try to get mom in and see if an IEP or a 504 plan could help Joe and create better, why is the words left my brain? Better ability to focus in class. Now, we would have to talk again. This is where ICC could help with the anti-bullying and really try to school can create programs or make sure that he's in a safe and protected environment at all times. Now, if we strengthen the mesosystems connections, like parent teacher email, maybe the Dojo app or parent a I don't know whatever the app would be used for his school. I believe it would be Dojo. flexible school meetings, that work for the parents' work schedule, maybe meetings if mom's not working in the morning instead, or accommodating her work schedule to make sure that she's able to support John at home with what's coming from school. And that's where the collaboration between the counselor and the community agencies could even help. So, like, I was able to have a therapeutic mentor, having the counselors kind of give that information to help him. We'll see that his stress could probably lessen. And if we can strengthen Joe's ecosystem that's advocating for flexible workplace policies, access to after school programs and community centers, Boys and Girls Club, um, what's the other one? There's the Boys and Girl Club, maybe a Taekwondo, look into sports. Some kind of community support could strengthen that. Now, there's the transport support, healthcare, or even if you had needed the tutoring, just trying to make sure that we can provide resources for that. Even though Joe doesn't enter these systems, they're directly affecting him. Now, if we review the macro system structures, we can look into maybe PMFLA for mom, um, maybe looking for Joe funding for smaller classroom settings, um, even resources for home. Um, and then we could even look at into like policies that can expand after school programming in that area. Now, the chrono system is how can we support Joe, like helping Joe process the past moves and these disruptions, supporting transitions like puberty or going from elementary school to middle school, ensuring that these long term mentoring can be stable, not just a short term service, which that's what some places do. They try to keep, especially with attendance, the policies around that can affect. So if Joe has a mentor, if the family's unable to keep the services, that service won't work because it would close sooner, which would cause more of a problem. Using the ecological approach, this means that a clinician doesn't just ask, "What's wrong with Joe?" They ask, "What's happening around Joe?" And this relationship becomes empathetic, collaborative, culturally informed, and also strength based. If we use these instead of labeling Joe as defiant or unmotivated, the therapist would recognize the environmental pressures that he's facing and would work with not only him but his family to navigate them together. This approach will also help Joe feel understood and not judged. Now, let's look at how this could really fit with social work today. Now, social work is built on a person and its environment perspective. The ecological theory is practically its blueprint. Now, according to Gitman and Hiller, good social workers theory must address the individual and the environment, acknowledge the structural oppression, allow interventions at micro, meso, and macro levels, empower the client, recognize the cultural context. Ecological system theory does all of these naturally. Working with Joe can involves micro level intervention, family therapy and school, um, policies, resource, and community supports. That's the macro level. And it's not just the theory is a good fit, it's the foundation of the modern practice. And when it comes to Joe, yes, ecological theory helps Joe fully, not just because of his symptoms, not just because of the behaviors, or not just because of his grades. It guides us towards a solution that strengthens the family, the school, the communicate, the communities, and the systems, It aligns with trauma informed care and strength based practices. And most importantly, it prevents us from blaming Joe for his struggles that that aren't his fault. I hope that this Bromford's Burner's theory of ecological system theory could show us every layer from the family to the policy and histories, shapes Joe's path. And remember, we grow in layers, and every layer matters. Until next time.